The First Amendment covers many rights,
like freedom of religion.
which allows you to practice or start any religion.
You have freedom from and freedom of religion.
And schools cannot form a religion.
The government can also not have a set religion.
Another right is the freedom of speech.
You are allowed to share your political views.
You can peacefully protest.
However, disagreement will happen.
The next right is the freedom of press.
You can talk about politics all you want.
You can make comedy out of politics.
Next is freedom of assembly.
There's a few types.
Like protesting, parades, hate speech, but you cannot break the law, like being on private property or damaging property, and no violating teen curfew.
The last right is states the freedom of petition.
The ability to sue governments for wrongdoings.
You can't be punished for pointing out the wrongdoings.
However, the court does get the final decision.
The Second Amendment was created in 1791. The purpose was that Americans can protect themselves and their families from Native American and other neighboring states.
Americans can own guns or weapons of their choosing by having a permit. In 2008, a case called the McDonald and the City of Chicago, where a man was charged with a handgun when the state of Chicago banned the use of guns except rifles, shotguns, in one's home or place in the business.
The National Rifle Association filed a lawsuit and decided that the states still have to acknowledge the amendments still have to be followed, and the people in Chicago can have a permitted gun.
A bad example in the Second Amendment is a story of a woman named Jamie Cassano. Her case was called Cassano versus Massachusetts. Jamie was in an abusive relationship with her boyfriend.
Jamie accepted a stun gun from a friend for self-defense. One night, when her ex-boyfriend confronted her outside of work and threatened her, she displayed the stun gun and successfully avoided an altercation.
However, when the police discovered that she was in possession of the stun gun, she was arrested, tried, and convicted under Massachusetts law that outlawed the possession of stun guns.
The reason this was a bad example is because she didn't have a permit to carry a gun, and it isn't an actual gun, it's only a stun gun, so it didn't tie into the Second Amendment.
The Third Amendment.
No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law.
When there is no war, soldiers are not allowed to stay in anyone's house without their permission. The Third Amendment protects people's privacy and property.
During the Revolutionary War, soldiers demanded to stay in people's houses and barns, etc. At that time it was legal because of the Quartering Act. This angered people, which caused the Third Amendment to be thought of and passed on December 15, 1791.
The Third Amendment is not as important in this time because the United States provides housing for our soldiers. Therefore, we do not need to give up our houses to them.
The Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says that people have the right to privacy and cannot be searched without reasonable cause. In 1969, John Fremont was suspected of a crime. Police broke into his house and gathered evidence without a warrant. When they tried to use this evidence at trial, it was found illegal and not allowed in the court. No unreasonable searches.
So the Fifth Amendment gives us the rights to a grand jury, no double jeopardy, no self-incrimination, and finally a right to due process. The meaning of the Fifth Amendment is to not let the government punish you because it wants to.
This is important because it helps prevent the government from using its power. An example of this is a man in Texas had been punished by the government for drug abuse and was sentenced to prison for 20 years. This was quickly overturned by the Fifth Amendment and he got away scot-free.
This is historically important because it helps protect and secure criminal rights to life, liberty, and property. Right now, it is still helping people.
The Sixth Amendment.
The Sixth Amendment serves to protect the accused, giving the right to a speedy trial, access to an attorney, and a fair jury on the state and federal level. Escobedo v. Illinois is a case where the federal court ruled the police cannot deny legal counsel during trial and interrogation. The Sixth Amendment applies to real life and everyday arrests made every day in America. The Gideon v. Wainwright case is a landmark case in the United States Supreme Court history, ruling that states provide legal counsel to everyone.
The Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment in civil cases gives people the right to trial by jury if the argument is over more than $20, and you cannot be tried twice for the same crime.
In the Feltner v. Columbia case in 1998, Alvin Feltner Jr. and his company Krypton International Corporation had 3 TV stations that ran several TV shows that belonged to Columbia Pictures. Columbia had failed to pay licensing payments, and being unable to pay the debt, revoked their license to run the shows. Krypton kept running the shows anyway. Columbia sued them and was awarded over $8 million in a court of equity without a trial. Feltner demanded a trial by jury, and the judgment was reversed. They then went to a trial in a court of law with the jury, and each television show that had ran without license was seen as a separate infringement, and Feltner had to give Columbia over $31 million instead of 8 like before. Feltner wanted it tried again, and they denied his request under the Seventh Amendment.
The importance of the Seventh Amendment. It means you cannot be jailed without the right to be tried by a judge. It makes the judicial process more fair and accessible to defendants. It will take more than a government official's word against yours to find that you're guilty, and prevents corruption.
The Eighth Amendment prohibits government from inflicting excessive bail, excessive fines, or cruel and unusual punishments.
The Eighth Amendment protects us from ridiculous and unnecessary consequences for small crimes.
In 1685 in English, Titus Oates was tried for perjury. He was sent to prison and was annually taken out for 2 days of pillory and whipping.
The Eighth Amendment is extremely important because without it you could be tortured for small crimes.
The Ninth Amendment. The Ninth Amendment states that there are other rights that may exist aside from the ones explicitly mentioned, and even though they are not listed in the Constitution, it does not mean they can be violated.
The reason why the Ninth Amendment came about is because people felt if they did not list completely everything, their rights would be violated. This amendment ensures the unlisted rights of people.
An example of this is jaywalking. It does not say you can just cross across the street whenever. It's a law that is not big enough to be in the Constitution, but it's something that we can still not violate.
The 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is protecting our rights that are not written down on the Bill of Rights, and also limiting the power of the government.
An example was after slavery was abolished, a black man was basically forced to work as a slave in a Virginia prison. The man sued the prison for $11 million using the 10th and the 13th Amendment as reinforcement for his case.